Please make sure you hit the like button on this side or this side right over there, and let's dive right into it. So today we have Keith Neumeyer. Keith Neumeyer is the CEO of probably the most notable silver mining company in the world, and one of the foremost kind of thought leaders in the gold and silver industries. And so it's fantastic to have you here today with us, Keith.
Well, Jake, it's a pleasure, and it's nice to meet you face to face, despite the fact it's virtual.
Yeah, screen to screen. So, all right, start me off with, give me your personal perception right now on the sentiment in the gold and silver market. I think, like, was it about an hour ago, we were at like $2 below 1,800 in gold. So what do you think about everything right now before we really kind of dive in?
Yeah, look, it's great to see the metal prices doing what they're doing. It's been, I've been in this business for 35 years, so I've seen lots of ups and downs. Going back to I was on the floor of the stock exchange in 1987. When the Dow was down 25% in one day, and I made more money the next day because I came in long that morning than I'd made up until any point in my previous trading history. So it was a great day the day after, but look, there was crashes in mid 90s. We had another crash in 2002, 2003, and then we had of course 2008, and we've had what we've witnessed just recently. And so look, it's being on the right side of these trades is always the biggest challenge. And in the case of silver and gold, we're finally re-entering what I think is going to be a multi-year bull market. I think it started in end of 2015, early 2016, where we saw the metals really take off in the summer of 2016. We had a bit of a pause into late validation phase in 2018, and a real breakout in 2019, and now into 2020. So I'm an extreme bull on both gold and silver, and for your listeners, it's a must place to be for investors, in my opinion.
So let's start with, why do you think silver's at $18? And out of the two, you have your smaller gold company, First Mining Gold, but you've really positioned yourself more in silver than gold. And so you've said things like you believe it's going to go to $100 an ounce. So I'd love for you to elaborate on why, not only the thesis of why you really believe in $100 silver, but why silver over gold. When you've had 35 years in the industry, you could have went into gold where it's less volatile, and tell me a little bit about why you think those.
Well, I came from the copper business. I put together First Quantum Minerals back in the early 90s and left that company in 2000. So I'm really a supply-demand fundamentalist. I believe that markets ultimately prevail. In other words, markets go through periods of disconnect or mispricing. Look at Tesla, for example. There's lots of companies out there that are mispriced, and the mining sector right now is mispriced as well, but on the other side of the pendulum. So silver is I've been asked, okay, well, why don't you think silver is precious metals? Well, I actually do think silver is a very precious metal, but I actually think it's greater than a precious metal. I think it's a strategic metal, because this call, you just told me before that this call started, you're turning 29, and so you've grown up in an environment where you're surrounded by technology. When I was your age, there was really very little technology around. I remember the fax machine, being invented. I remember the black and white television, first color TVs coming out. I remember all this stuff, and laptops and computers and so on and so forth. I was actually a computer salesman when I was in my early 20s for a company called NCR, which is a major U.S. technology company. But nevertheless, that's not that important. But my point is, all these technologies that we take for granted can consume vast amounts of silver. And we're only mining on a worldwide scale 8 to 1. So for every 1 ounce of gold we're mining, we're only mining 8 ounces of silver, which is pretty ludicrous. And when Sir Isaac Newton was asked, by King Henry VIII, back in the 1500s, what should we value the sterling at? 16 to 1, because there's 16 ounces. So King said, okay, fine. So that was his view of what was in the Earth's crust compared to gold, 16 to 1. And that number's held up over the years. But we're mining 8 to 1. So we're actually mining less than what the scientists think that's available in the Earth's crust, which tells you that silver is way more unique, or way more rare than what the market actually thinks it is. So if the price actually traded at close to its mining rate, which of course I just said is 8 to 1, that's going to put triple-digit prices on silver. And in a gold bull market, which I'm pretty sure we're in, well, I'm confident we're in, when we're going to see $2,000-$3,000 gold and likely higher, what's that going to do to the price of silver?
I'm hoping that it pulls it way up there. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, I think it's inevitable, because look, look at our website. We're selling silver today at $21 an ounce. This is our own silver that we produce, and of course, there's fabrication costs and so on and so forth, and plus our mining costs and everything else. But at $21 an ounce, we're not really making any money. It just covers the cost of that part of our business. It's not really our core business. You see people out there selling silver at $23, $24, $25 an ounce because they're trying to have a legitimate profit-making business, and they have to sell the metal at $6-7 above spot. That tells you that there's a problem in the physical markets.
And all of this type of actual fundamentals and supply and demand is what made you say it makes more sense when you went to First Majestic next. It made you feel like it just made a lot more sense because of the overall financial potential. If you can handle the volatility, it just made more sense to be in the silver space versus the gold when you were rationally looking at this back then.
I love gold. I'm the chairman of First Mining Gold Corp, and I've assembled, I think, one of the best gold portfolios for any junior gold company in the space. And your listeners should go and look at that company. It's very cheaply traded in Canada, and I think it's going to do quite well over time. But gold is quite different than silver. Silver is very much a commodity, very much a strategic metal that's required in everything we do as the human race. If you took silver out of your life today, your life would be dramatically different. You couldn't fly, you couldn't drive, you couldn't use your computer. A lot of our energy would not be available to us. It would have a ricochet throughout the entire economy, and this is pretty new. You go back to the mid '80s, where silver was primarily used in silverware and coinage, and collector items. It wasn't really used so well. Electronics didn't exist for the most part. All that above ground supply that the governments used to own in the form of coinage, going back to the 60s and 70s, was consumed in the 90s and the early 2000s, and all that silver's gone.
Consumed for an industrial purpose?
Consumed for electronics and industrial purposes. And how many people do you know that have recycled their television or recycled their cell phone? These machines, or these components that we put silver into over the last 30 years, for the most part, has ended up in waste dumps. And because recycling silver out of a 40-inch television would cost you more than the silver's worth, right? So you just couldn't do it, right? And because the price is high enough, maybe at $150 silver, okay, maybe recycling of televisions, starts to make a little bit of sense. But we're a long ways away from that ever happening, in my view, and that's a totally different discussion that is probably not suited for this time. But gold is quite different. 90% of all gold ever mined by the human race is sitting on the surface in some form, because it's not used in industry. It's in vaults. It's in bars or coins or whatever. 90% of all silver ever mined in the human race is in the ocean, is in waste dumps, never to be used again. unless, of course, we have crazy silver price, which makes it economic for people to go start mining waste dumps.
Right.
I'm not sure, are we 100 years away from that? I have no idea, but it's definitely not there today.
So in the uranium market, a lot of the debate is around, well, how much above ground supply until we get back to a deficit that causes the spot price to really move. Outside of the fundamental, or outside of gold pulling silver up, if we're really in this kind of precious metals rally and it continues to go, from the supply and demand perspective, as someone who's in the know more than anyone, because you hear so many different stories on that, where do you really think we're at with the actual leftover demand or leftover supply that's still out there?
Well, everyone lies.
Yeah. That's why I asked, because you hear both. I've heard both arguments.
Yeah. So look, we're a member of the Silver Institute and jewelry manufacturers and so on and so forth, who are all involved in the silver space. And it's always been a beef of mine, how this data gets put together.
Yeah.
Because, I've spoken directly to Sony, or probably not Sony, Samsung. We've had discussions with jewelry manufacturers. I know other companies that have had discussions with other companies in the silver space. I'm talking about the consumers. And these guys are absolutely paranoid that investors like you and me are going to figure out how tight this market is. Samsung, I've asked them directly, how much silver do you use on an annual basis to produce your cell phones and all your gadgets, TVs, and everything else? They won't tell you.
Whoa.
They're absolutely paranoid that you're going to know, because if you knew, you're going to front run them, and every single hedge fund on the planet is going to front run them. And silver is at $18 silver. Silver is an $18 billion market. That's tiny. How many times can 18 billion be fit into Microsoft or Tesla or Apple? Apple can buy the entire silver business in a single check. Of course, maybe one day the technology companies will own the mining space. Maybe that makes more sense than anything. But we're in a very, very tight market. And so the stats that you see out there about supply demand, we know what the supply is. We know what the miners produce. But, trying to figure out, how much, silver is in this thing here, and how much silver all these cell phone companies, all these computer companies use on a daily basis or a yearly basis, it's all plugs. People are just guessing. Mm-hmm. And I know, I've been in the silver space for 18 years, and this is an extremely, extremely tight market. If there's 1 billion ounces of silver sitting on the Earth's surface available for sale into industry for consumer goods, I'd be absolutely blown away. I don't think the number's even close to that. We have ETFs, of course. If you combine all the ETFs on the planet, it comes to somewhere around 900 million ounces of silver in these ETFs. But there's a whole debate on that as well. Are these ETFs actually holding paper contracts, or are they actually holding physical? In my opinion, they're holding paper, because there's no hope in hell that the GLD or SLV can increase the amount of metal that's in their ETFs over the last 2 months to the degree that they're publishing, because the metal's not there. Like, where the heck did they get it? Because we're having people phoning us every day looking for metal. They can't find it. And so an ETF can just all of a sudden get 10 or 20 tons. That's paper, and it's complete bullshit.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect storm for someone like myself that is listening to someone like you talk about these supply and demand fundamentals. I have more exposure to silver than gold for the reasons that people like yourself has illustrated. So are you looking at gold, the real first moving of silver being more from the precious metals bull market perspective, and gold going up and the money printing, but then once the price gets up and then that starts moving it, then you run into more of this position on maybe the back end of the rally later where there's effects that you see more buying from these types of companies and people that might be more afraid of the shortage, that comes, you think, maybe as a later stage, that could be some extra nitro in the chamber?
Well, as you know, I think you've studied, based on my knowledge of what you've done, because I've watched a lot of your stuff. I think we're on the same page that silver is kind of gold on steroids. It's hard for silver to go up if gold isn't. Yeah. If gold is going down, it's unlikely silver would go up, because gold is kind of the granddaddy of all commodities. So it is the ultimate currency. You should have gold in your portfolio for sure at all times, regardless if it's a bull market or bear market. You should always have an allocation of gold in your portfolio. Silver tends to be a bit more speculative, a bit more volatile, but you can catch silver on a bull market, a gold bull market, and you could see silver outperform gold at 300 to 500%, and that's the kind of environment I think we're going to be seeing. Go back to I'll use 2016 as an example, because that was a pretty dramatic year where we started January 2016 at $13.50 silver, and by July we had $21 silver. It went up $7, so silver went up 50%, and gold went up from, I think, about 1050 to 1400, so it went up about 35% approximately. So there's your difference, right? So three to one change. First Majestic shares went from, I think, in the $4 range to $20 over that period of time. It went up 7 times during that time. And so you get the miners. You don't only get silver ramping quicker than gold, but you get the miners ramping quicker than the metal. So it can be pretty exciting environment if you can.
Absolutely. So speaking of volatility in the silver market, let me ask you, and something that I've always been curious more outside of just your views on gold and silver and such. So you've been in a really volatile business that you've seen times where I would imagine your cost of the sale of the good is in a really poor position compared to how much it's costing you to produce it. And there's a lot of ups and downs in it. It's kind of a stomach-wrenching business, but you've become one of the most successful companies, and you yourself has become one of the most notable figures in the mining space. But you've really been able to grow in such an industry that probably eats a lot of people and CEOs alive. Could you tell me a little bit about, as a someone that's in their 20s, I'm always want to learn from very successful people who've accomplished a lot. And I'm genuinely curious, what are the things you've really learned about life and yourself and about business, navigating such a turbulent industry and succeeding at it too?
One of these days I have to write a book, I think, but you're ahead of me on that. But the mining sector is extremely cyclical, and it's very much a boom and bust type industry, whereby the banks convince executive teams to buy out of the money assets or high cost assets because we have good price, and using high metal price. If you use $25 silver and $2,000 gold, it makes a lot of mines look pretty good. But so some executive teams, they get caught into that, kind of FOMO, and they buy high, and they start building these mines or developing these mines or doing what they're doing, exploring, and then all of a sudden the market changes on them. And then the metals drop, and then that asset becomes uneconomic, and then you have to write it down, and often the asset never gets developed, and sometimes it's 20 or 30 years into the future that asset actually shows up on someone else's books, where they might start the whole process all over again. And because we're the planet itself, we know where the mineralized, ore bodies are for the most part. So, but we also know that a lot of them are very low grade and will need much higher metal price to be ever economic acquisitions. From a cost perspective, I love buying assets when no one wants them. I love buying assets when they're out of favor for some reason. Where I could bring our talent, our money, and turn an asset around that otherwise is not being looked at in a favorable way. And that's how I built First Majestic. We've made over the last 18 years, I'd have to go back and count exactly, but at least 10 acquisitions over that period of time. And we've developed, one of the best portfolios in the silver space that exists today. And but at the same time, I never got caught into buying, at the peaks of markets. I've always been extremely patient and identified assets I've liked. But if it takes me, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and in the last case, the last mine we just bought back in 2018, we started making our first attempt in 2006 to buy that mine, and we didn't get it in our portfolio until 12 years later. So you have to be patient. As a major shareholder of First Majestic, I'm very much aligned with our shareholders, and every move that we make, I think about how is this going to impact our shareholders? How is it going to impact the share price? Because that's what I care about ultimately is making a profit and making successful operations that can stay around during these cyclical periods. So you look at an asset that's got decent grade, low capex, that can survive in a low metal price environment. That's what you need to have in your portfolio. You can't have all these high cost assets in your portfolio that need high prices constantly because as I said earlier, that this environment is very cyclical.
So a lot of times, and I know you see it probably, the truth is most people are not successful at their life. They say 9 out of 10 people die with less than $10,000 and virtually no financial assets. 76% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And you probably see it a lot in people you talk to, and especially looking at the younger generation. It's like, something's volatile, and then we just can't handle the stress or the turbulence of it, so we give up, or we say, oh, it's not meant to be, it's getting too hard. What are some of the tools, you talked about patience, what are some of the tools or personality traits that really developed in you to make you a successful leader with First Majestic and your core team? What are some of those things that have allowed you guys to succeed? You said patience and long-term vision and keeping low cost. What are some other type of interpersonality traits that's made you successful? Because I'm really fascinated in, there's a lot of, you said all the, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, we just broke up a little bit there. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I just was saying that, I think it goes back to, my character. I'm very stubborn and I'm very convicted. Throughout my life, when I've listened to other people's opinions on certain things, on ideas that I've had, they've generally been wrong, and I've generally been right. So I, and that's kind of created this kind of tenacity, this kind of stubbornness in me, where putting together, my first company, First Quantum Minerals, African-based copper company. I remember, the street when I was trying to raise money, saying, "Oh, that asset's too small. You're never going to do anything with it. It's what are you doing? Like, you're wasting time, and go drill a hole in the ground." And I said, "No, we have a plan. We have a vision." And some people bought into it, other people didn't. And now, that company is one of the largest copper companies in the world. And in 2002, when I put together First Majestic Silver, I did much the same thing. I went and looked for assets that I had a particular view on the metal. I had a particular view on where we're going to go. I predicted $50 silver. Silver was $55 at the time, and no one believed it. And so I put together an asset base over from 2003, 4 to 2006, 2007, and I had no competition. It was actually pretty crazy. I was able to raise not necessary capital because I had some reputation, and so I had some financial backers, and we basically I just arrived in Mexico, put together the team, and started buying assets, and everyone thought I was absolutely crazy. But 5-6 years later, then everyone starts copying me, and it's pretty funny. So today we have a very successful silver mining company, and I still have a view. I still believe today that silver is going to go to triple digits, and I get laughed at all the time, but I'm not going to get knocked off my game just because some people think I'm talking my own book. I actually believe, for real fundamental reasons, if we're going to go green and we're going to do everything we need to do as a human race to evolve this species to where we want to go, we need a lot more silver and copper as well. But obviously I run a silver company, so I'm going to keep pushing as hard as I can, growing this business, stay very much focused on silver, and one of these days I will be vindicated when I see triple digits.
So
stubbornness will knock you off your game.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So when you're looking at your business and you're looking at, and we'll talk in a second about all the ounces that you've refused to sell, when you're looking at it right now, like it seems like you're so strategic in your decision to get into silver, and you elaborated on some of those supply and demand reasons. Are you really looking down the line, and you're really saying, when you're looking at your ounces you refuse to sell and you're thinking about these things, you're really looking down the line, you're saying this could be $100, and you're looking at how things play out. You're putting all the wheels in motion to get your cash flow to keep you moving through to when we really have a movement in silver and gold, and we really see there being a negative effect on the supply and demand fundamentals, which causes Samsung and these companies to call you up. You're in the game for that because you really firmly believe that's what's coming. You're not in the game for a little run and cashing out your shares. Is you really fundamentally believe that silver is going to be one of the most important things in the world in the future.
Yeah, look, my share price has never gone backwards over the last 18 years. And, my share price has always increased over time. Well, except when I got divorced, my ex-wife took a chunk of my stock back in 2006. But other than that, my share price is my share position has always gone up, and I'm proud of that. And I completely believe in what you just said. I think there is a point that people don't realize where they're going to wake up. And I don't know what the catalyst is. I get asked this question, what's going to be the catalyst that finally drives silver to triple digits? And is it going to be Apple, all of a sudden not being able to produce iPads? Is it going to be, Panasonic or Samsung not being able to produce, whatever gadgets they're producing? I don't know what it's going to be, but there will be a point. We saw rhodium, we saw have palladium, we saw cobalt. These metals all of a sudden get into the headlines because someone wakes up and says, geez, we need a lot of this particular metal to do whatever the heck we want to make. And the big funds, institutions in New York or in London decide to start going into that particular market and start front running all the end users, of course, irritating them all, but they've got nothing they could do about it. Do you think Samsung cares whether silver is $100 or whether it's $20? Is it going to affect the cost of their cell phone? Silver is trading at $150 an ounce. No, it's they don't care. But the hedge funds don't see the silver story yet. When silver shows up in the headlines, which it will, I don't know when, and it could, it's going to do what all these other metals have done, and we're going to see this metal really disconnect itself from this old ratio that we've been held against, the gold ratio, and I think we'll see something closer to 10-1.
So one of the things that I like about you a lot, and I think it kind of goes to what your stubbornness and I think a lot of people really respect about you in the gold and silver industry is your decision with First Majestic to withhold some of the silver production from the previous quarter because you refused to sell at these low prices. So can you explain how that has panned out for you since your decision to do that, and a little bit more about that? I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time we've done it. We've done it a few times, and I make those decisions. I do all the, because of my trading history, I do all the trading for metals in the company. And anyways, it was funny because on our website we were selling silver at $17.50. That's the lowest we've ever sold silver for as a retail product on our website, and we were following the market down. Silver hit $13 an ounce, or for a couple of days, which is pretty shocking to everyone. And we were just shaking our head. And then I stopped at $17.50. I wouldn't go lower than that because I'd say, and our sales started to take off like crazy. We were selling thousands of ounces a day in silver at $17.50 when it was trading at 13. And I'm going, wow, this is amazing. And we got a call from Sprott Asset Management, not Sprott Money, saying, raise your price. You're selling it too cheap. And we go, oh shit. So we raised the price to $18.50, and the sales kept coming. And we raised it to, I think we raised it straight to 20 after that. And that was in line with because we checked what other dealers were selling their metal for, and we did slow down the sales a little bit because we were running out of inventory, and that told me very clearly that there was very much a disconnect between the actual paper price and the actual physical price. And I've seen it before, but that was pretty darn dramatic. So I decided to stop sales of all our metal, gold and silver. And gold was, but we started accumulating our silver, and I think our inventories got up to somewhere around 1.5 million ounces of silver. It'll be in our financial statements, but somewhere around that number. And so of course silver took off, and I didn't sell an ounce until $17.50, and then just in the last couple of days we've been sellers of some of that inventory in the $18 range. Not that I think $18 is a great price. I think we should be selling at a much higher price, but we do have a business to run, and we have to have our bills to pay, and we have our staff to pay, and that is our life blood is a metal that we pull out of the ground, so we have to sell it eventually. But look, I saved the business as a result of that decision. Do the math. $5 an ounce on 1.5 million ounces. It's a considerable amount of money that goes into our treasury versus being put into the coffers of the banks who are taking advantage of these markets.
Fantastic. And so I built a lot larger position in First Majestic when kind of at the tail end of the most recent sell-off with the coronavirus. I was seeing it at like $5. And so, yeah, I've already had a pretty nice move in a lot, your company and a lot of other of these heavily beat down silver companies. So I've had a nice little run. And so it's exciting to see it's starting to move on all cylinders. Give me your thoughts right now on First Majestic and any other things that, or opportunities that you might be looking at, such as M&A, or just what you're foreseeing out of First Majestic with your goals throughout the rest of this year.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest goal right now is to get back the ounces we lost as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 3 mines that are currently operating, 60% of our revenues from silver, 40% of our revenues from gold. We have 3 operating mines in Mexico, and we produce somewhere around 24 million ounces of silver equivalent annually. And we're happy to say that all 3 are back up and running, and we're hoping to push them hard and as a result of the loss of production over that 6 or 8 week period. Whether we're going to make it all up or not, I'm not sure, but we're going to do our best to accomplish that. And we've got some big investments that we're making in Mexico, and they're all restarted. We've got modernization technology being brought into San Dimas, some additional technology being brought into Santa Elena, and increased production. We're looking for a very exciting 2021 with both Santa Elena and San Dimas producing more metal than they have this year. And then on the M&A front, look, I can't get into details, of course, but there's lots of stuff out there. We know this space, likely better than anyone. We're always looking for ways to grow the business. The last transactions we bought the Santa Elena mine back in October 2015. It doubled the size of the company. We bought San Dimas in May 2018. Again, doubled the size of the company. So the last couple of transactions have been pretty successful, pretty chunky. We're looking for another type of acquisition like that to substantially increase the size of the company. We don't want to just go buy, an exploration company whereby we have to go drill some holes in the ground and wait 5 or 10 years for it to be producing. We want to get something that will actually make an impact for our shareholders. But those types of big chunky transactions, they take a while to happen. As I said, earlier, the last one took 12 years. So hopefully it doesn't take to do the next one. But there's a lot of thought that goes into M&A. I do think the stock, as you asked me pre interview, there is some tax issues that we're fighting with the Mexican government, as a result of one of the last transactions we did. And there's lots of discussion going on around that resolution. We're hoping to see a resolution in the next 3 to 6 months. But I think it is holding back the stock a little bit. I've noticed over the last couple of months that First Majestic has underperformed some of the others, and I'm thinking that's probably the reason why. But I should assure investors that there's a lot of energy going into resolving that matter, and we think it will be resolved, as I said. And when it does, I think First Majestic will regain its leadership role, from a stock performance perspective, in the silver space.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, one time you made a tweet and you said you went into the liquor store to buy some beer and they refused to sell it to you. I went in to get an espresso shot at an empty coffee shop this morning at 7 a.m. and they refused to take my money, and I didn't bring my wallet with me because I was on a walk. So they refused it. And for a long time, I've heard, and one of the reasons that I told you before we went on air, one of the things of dropping out when I went into more research into understanding where the world is moving. And one of the things we've heard a lot about is kind of the war on cash. And it's ironic that, you had that experience, and I said, oh, that's interesting. And then it happened to me, and it made me think of you immediately after when I was walking out. And ironically, I was interviewing you 4 hours later. So, when you think about getting into the industry, and you've heard from all types of people, there's conspiracy theorists in the gold and silver industry. There's supply and demand fundamental people. What are some of the common myths or out there things that you heard earlier that now you're starting to see happen that make gold and silver attractive? Things that maybe you heard earlier in the industry from fanatics that you're starting to see play out.
Yeah, well, it's a very broad question, and I think when I was much younger, I would have never thought that governments would ever manipulate markets. I actually, when I was in college and beyond and started my career, I would have never thought that the human, our populations in the West, Canada, United States, and so on, would actually allow our politicians to manipulate markets. But for whatever reason, I guess, post 87 crash, Greenspan, tried to float the economy and try to, flatten the economic curve and take away recessions and so on. And the governments, for whatever reason, felt that they have the right to go into markets and somehow save the human race with our tax dollars, or putting our children in debt. for these crazy reasons of manipulating interest rates or manipulating gold and silver prices or oil prices. And I would have never thought it would happen, but we see it every day. It is very distressing, and it's very concerning. I've got young kids, and I don't like what governments are doing today. The old saying goes, don't let a good disaster go to waste. And 9/11 happened, and the Western civilization lost a lot of their rights as a result. Of all the new laws that were passed, and everyone just kind of sat back and let it happen. Now this pandemic, one of the things that you mentioned about cash, the government's been trying to take cash out of society for as long as I could, remember. And then now they've convinced people that cash is transmitting the COVID-19 virus. So God forbid, don't use that dirty piece of paper because you might get sick if you use it. Great for governments. Wow. So all of a sudden you get a traffic ticket, and you're in front of a judge to pay your fine, and the officer on the other side, you bought some pornography the other day. Oh, I see you're a heavy drinker. You've been going to this bar, that bar. I see you went to a massage parlor. Because everything's recorded. You don't have any cash in your pocket anymore. So now they can track absolutely everything that you do, and you bet they're going to use it against you if they can use it against you. So it's your generation that really has to stand up against this phenomenon that's occurring. We continually lose our rights, and government continually takes more control of our lives. And really, they're not going to stop until we're all slaves.
Yeah, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that as a first timer in gold and silver, of course, physical silver and physical gold, but also in the mining stocks, and starting to have these movements. And I see them, and I'm like, holy cow! When these things really move, and it really does feel like I got in, like I was just kind of got lucky to get in at a time where things were so undervalued in the physical price, but also the mining stocks. And it seems like there's so much great potential. Maybe you could elaborate on, because a lot of people feel like maybe this might be one of those generational times. Do you think so?
Yeah, I do. It's, this is very similar to what happened in 2000, 2001. I remember, Y2K. I'm not sure if you remember that, but that was the hype of the day, and the clock was going to tick over on January 1st, 2020, and the entire world was going to come to a crashing halt. And there was all these business plans coming out, and all this money being made on this .com boom. And then lo and behold, by March 2000, the Nasdaq peaked at 5,000, and over the next 3 years, it collapsed by 80%. And that was the beginning of the gold bull market that started in 2002, that went for 10 years. And we saw a 10 times move, or probably an 8 times move on gold, from, let's say, call it 250 to 1900. We got a 10 times move on silver, 5 to 50. And if you look at those same kinds of moves, that's what I'm seeing starting now. So go back to 2016, using 1350 as your bottom on silver, using 1050 as your bottom on gold, using the 8 times on gold, that gives you $8,000 gold. Using the 10 times on silver, that gives you $135 an ounce on silver. And I think it's going to be 10 years. I think this we're 3 years in, 3 or 4 years in to a 10-year bull market.
Yeah, if that happens, I'll buy you a steak. So
I'll pay for the beer.
All right, deal. So you think we're about in like maybe the third inning then, is what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
So I know you got to get going here. Final 2 questions. One, sure. Someone like Jim Rickards, obviously you're someone who probably has seen all of his presentation, knows him personally and all that. So He's much higher on gold than he is silver. He's like, sure, get a monster box, but he's not like really a believer in silver at all. And
right.
what is your pitch or your angle to someone that sloughs it off and is this wacko should have a pure gold mining company, and obviously you have your First Gold Mining, but they should be First Majestic Gold, not First Majestic Silver. In conclusion here, and I know you've kind of done that, but give me a final pitch on why you really believe in it and why people are underestimating it.
Sure. The gold. Let's talk about gold just for a sec. So in my opinion, what has put the bid into gold is the central bank buying over the last 2-3 years. The central bankers have come into this market and they're accumulating gold like they've never done since the 70s, and that's taken up a lot of the excess supply and has driven prices higher. Now, is the reason that there's going to be a reset? Is that reason going to be because we have a new global currency coming? Does that mean the U.S. dollar is going to lose its stature in the world? We don't know. But that's a very, very long game, and for the U.S. to lose their reserve currency status, it's going to take a lot of time. I think it will happen. But is that a 5-year game or a 25-year game? I don't know. So my point is, when that happens, you need to have gold in your portfolio, and that's going to drive ultimately gold to prices that Rickard talks about. This 10,000 ounce number that he bandies around. And I completely buy into that. But for me, silver is a much more short-term trade because we are. We're getting off oil and gas. We're going electric. We're re-electrifying this planet in new ways. We need technology. You're not going to give up your iPhone and your iPad or your computer tomorrow. Our kids, India, China, most of the planet is going electronic. They want all the gadgets we want. So the consumption of silver and copper are critical to where we're going as a human race, and the ball's not going backwards. It's going forwards. It's not going to stop, and it's going at accelerating speeds and gobbling up metals at rates that currently the market does not fully understand. It doesn't need gold to achieve those things. Gold does not show up in those technologies to any great degree. So gold is one side of the equation, very much financial, very much a granddaddy of all currencies, but silver is strategic and is required to do what we need to do. And that's why I think the shorter term game is silver, and that's why I'm so invested in silver. Fantastic.
That's really a great summary of your term, strategic metal. That is, I think that's such a good term. So let me ask you in conclusion, what do you think? We were talking before, you've got, what did you say, 29-year-old, 24-year-old. So they're all kind of around my age, except for your youngest. And so you interact with their friends and you especially look at my generation. What do you think are the most important money and business lessons or advice or things that people, the next generation needs to know, that if you were in charge of the education system or the business schools, what are the things that you think we need to know, that I need to know and my friends need to know?
Yeah, you broke up there a little bit, but hopefully it shows up on the recording. But yeah, look, I think that young people, first of all, you need to find something you really love. And because no one wants to go to work every day, work 9 to 5 and collect a paycheck and hate their life. Finding something you love to do is tough. But you have to follow your heart and you have to, just kind of follow your instincts and if it's playing a piano or whether it's, taking care of dogs or whether it's, trading the stock market or building businesses, building gadgets, inventing things, whatever it may be, find something that you have passion towards. Because when you have passion towards a particular belief or something you enjoy doing, it's amazing what the human can achieve. And then you combine that with other people in the same room. So once you figure out that, associate yourself with a bunch of like-minded individuals, and so that you can develop yourselves together in the same path. And because collective brains obviously are more effective than just one individual. And then maybe a company pops out of that, or maybe an idea pops out of that, or maybe it's just happiness that pops out of that, right? But if you go along that path of finding something you love, showing passion, working with other people around on the same path, and you have to have a smile on your face every morning. It's one of the things that took me a long time when I was building businesses is waking up in the morning with a smile on my face. And if you're not waking up in the morning with a smile on your face, why aren't you? Right? And then work to that end to make sure you are. Because when you are, then all of a sudden you're like, it's like weight coming off your shoulders. And all of a sudden you start, luck starts to happen, success starts to happen, a lot of exciting things start to happen in your life. And that's really, I think the function, or, that should be your focus.
What's your favorite, in 2 seconds, what's your favorite quote or your favorite thing that you live by? I'm self-made. I said it already, to be stubborn. I think that's what it is, just stubbornness. I'm serious. People, unfortunately don't like to see other people be successful. People get jealous when you're successful. I'm not sure you've experienced your age, and it was frustrating. And so I learned to be very stubborn, and I listen to myself, and I always try to improve myself every day to gain. And if I do make a gain, I'm very hard on myself. I'm my most hardest critic, and it's just the way it is. Beautiful.